We are back. Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project. I'm Rob Kalwarowsky, and as always, the yang to my yin. Wearing black today, Susan Hobson. Susan, how are you?
I had to wear the black. All my sweaters are covered in storage right now. I've got some major work going on at home today, so this is one of the only ones I could reach. Don't read into it.
We always do. Obviously, we have to start off with a quote. So I have one here from trauma expert Peter Levine, and he says, "The paradox of trauma is that it has both the power to destroy and the power to transform and resurrect." And we're going to be talking about that resurrection and the destruction here with our special guest returning to this show, the author of The Ultimate Assistant and TEDx speaker, Bonnie Low-Kramen. Bonnie, how are you?
I am great, Rob and Susan. It's so wonderful to be back for a return engagement. Like we didn't have enough.
Clearly.
We never have enough. And obviously, Bonnie, we should totally refer folks to listen to part one, but for folks who didn't, can you just give us a little background on yourself?
Yeah. For 25 years, I worked as a personal assistant to Oscar-winning actress Olympia Dukakis, and I did that in New York City and New Jersey. And then 11 years ago, I left my work with Olympia in order to speak and teach globally. I'm now up to 14 countries and 38 states because I counted, training assistants how to be the very best they can be in support of their executives. And I'm also involving the leaders with this training as well, because I'm calling that building the ultimate partnership. In this new world we're in, we need to take a fresh look at how we're operating in the workplace. And so that is my passion and mission. And we're running into some challenges. And I know it's so great to connect with professionals like you who are willing to tackle the tough stuff about what people are really facing these days.
What are people really facing, Bonnie? Let's not waste any time here. Let's just dive right into the deep end.
Okay, Susan. Well, we really got into it when we talked about workplace bullying and sexual harassment on part one of our conversation. And clearly that hits a nerve with each of you. And it didn't take me long when I first started speaking professionally, and the conversations that would happen after a presentation when the audience comes up to you, members of the audience, and you just see it in their eyes that when I say the words respect and disrespect and bullying, when I first started talking about it more than a decade ago, it was very new territory. I didn't hear a lot about it, but it was so obvious that it was slowing people down and stopping them dead in their tracks in the workplace. And it really seemed so illogical to me that there was a seeming permission of these behaviors in the workplace. And I am determined to get to the bottom of it because it's causing too much pain and suffering that is long lasting, that is traumatizing, that we agree that the trauma doesn't just last for the day it happens. I ask audiences, how long does it last? Is it just for the day, for the week, for the month? And they yell back at me. They say, no, forever, for years, forever. And I don't know, I believe we share the idea that that we can do so much better. That's not okay with us.
We can't, obviously we can do so much better. And the one thing I would say is, yes, it lasts forever. However, you can heal. And that's the call that I would say to everyone out there is you will remember it, but your daily experience will change after you heal. And that's the big thing. And
healing, though, Rob, comes with awareness and breaking the silence around it. Yeah.
absolutely.
And that's, I have to say, in this new world we're in 2022, and this, where so many staff are working remotely or virtually, they're, coming in intermittently. It's very easy to be invisible in the trauma and to be silent. Silence is often a problem with workplace bullying and sexual harassment. It has been for a very long time, but I'm concerned that it's more complicated to break the silence now when you're trying to do it over a webcam. I don't know what you think about that, but difficult conversations were hard enough when we're in the same room together, but it's for many, it's trickier over cyberspace.
Totally. And the stats would back you up in a sense that we have seen a rise in bullying based on folks moving to remote work. And I think that's the interpersonal element has sort of decreased. And like a lot of my clients, they still don't use video. And I know when I was in corporate, we didn't use video for like 2 years into the pandemic. It was just all either like phone, well, not phone, but like Teams with no video or email, right? And so you really lose the connection that it's a person on the other side and not just a name that has no face.
I'm very concerned about that. And I'm particularly concerned about this when it comes to women, because women have, the stakes are higher with how we look on camera. And so the danger is to be literally invisible, to not have your webcam on, and then to not contribute verbally to the conversation makes it super duper easy to be invisible. And that is, we already know that the pandemic really hurt women, that chased a lot of women away from the workforce. And now the new environment, there's a new phenomenon, a trend emerging called proximity bias. And proximity bias is that the people who are choosing, the staffers who are choosing to go into the office and have proximity to their leaders have an advantage over those who are staying at home.
Oh, and it's very much real.
Yeah.
I've
so it's
heard
really
several
important
leaders
to be mindful of it and intentional about how we're operating. So that's why I raise it, to just so that, staff can make decisions around that.
Let's plug our audience into what we actually are talking about when we're talking about bullying, because, sometimes when I try to address some of these things in the chair with executive clients, their whole perspective is that's how you get the job done. You yell, you berate, you have to be an authoritarian, all that old school type of 1.0 management, not leadership, in my humble opinion, style,
right,
that we've seen from the past, right? Hanging on for dear life. So let's just make sure we're really clear and getting our audience into alignment in terms of what actually constitutes bullying.
Right. There are many different behaviors that constitute bullying, but they can include, at a meeting, to publicly humiliate someone, to literally yell at them, throw things. But there's more passive aggressive forms of bullying as well, to withhold important information from an email. So sabotage. Sabotaging someone is bullying. Ostracizing someone, to plan a lunch, for example, but exclude person because we don't like them, or that's considered bullying. Sexual harassment is one example of workplace bullying. That is an element of it. It's one example. Cyberbullying, being super easy to hit send on I call them nasty grams, those messages that you receive that really are kind of poisonous. So there's a wide range of behaviors, and governments are having trouble legislating around bullying because it is difficult to define it. And, one person's bullying is another person's, well, they're just having a bad day. For me, what I've seen over these years of working with assistants and talking with leaders, the clincher, the big differentiator is the frequency of these behaviors. Like, we know that everybody has a bad day. We do. And they, are, moody and, may let a profanity fly, but it's the frequency when it happens again and again and again. And, to rooms of assistants who are 93 to 97% female, I will say to them point blank, is it accurate that when a man is doing these kinds of bullying behaviors, we tend to be easier on men? We tend to let men slide and say, oh, that's just the way Joe is. That's just the way he is. And we are less likely to let women slide with these kinds of behaviors.
Why is that, do we think?
I believe it's about the way we're socialized as young girls, that we are trained to seek the approval of men and to view other women as competition and as adversaries. I do believe these behaviors, while I'm generalizing right now, rooms of assistants will just nod their heads in great agreement that I feel like it's really important to speak to it, that in general, we tend to let men slide on these behaviors for longer than we do with women.
I think it also is just notoriously a power dynamic issue, right? Like, when I think of all the different aspects of bullying that you just described, that really is the common denominator, right? Power over. And I think especially in the context of business, that's legitimately how it's been through the time.
It's an abuse of power, for sure. But here's the thing, we've had this thing called the Great Resignation that came as a result of the pandemic. And so we had great numbers of people exiting companies, and the data is showing right now that still 40% of staffers are considering leaving their jobs right now.
That's right.
We, the three of us, have been sharing data around these issues. And so this must be a wake-up call for leaders about what behaviors are chasing all of these people away. Bullying is part of what is chasing these people away, and many companies are having difficulty replacing people. So these antiquated ideas about management, this leading by intimidation, is not working. It isn't effective. That staff tell me again and again and again, and I believe this with every fiber of my being, that what staff wants most is to feel respected and valued and an important part of the organization. It's just not logical that leaders spend a lot of money hiring staff. Why then do we want to chase them away with abusing and demeaning and diminishing them? It isn't logical. So, leaders like us, we have to go in and name it, both to leaders and to staff. I can't tell you how many staff have come to me and said, Bonnie, until you started talking about bullying, I didn't realize that's what was happening to me.
That's why I wanted to define it, right? Because I think it probably happens more than people even recognize is happening, either to them or to their colleagues.
It's gotten normalized. And as a man, Rob, I'd certainly be interested in hearing your take on this. I mean, because I spend my life generally in rooms of women who are dealing with the aftermath of trauma of these behaviors. And the pandemic, the reason it still exists in this post-pandemic world is because the stress level and the anxiety is still very high for every member of a staff, from the CEO on down. So, this thing is still shaking out in the new world.
Totally. And I want to echo this, right? And so Susan and I, we were digging into the data around Leadership 2.0, and we looked at the Gallup results, and Gallup proves basically that employee engagement drives profitability, productivity, well-being, lower quality defects, less turnover, like basically everything that you could possibly want as a leader, you get through employee engagement.
Yes.
Now, they also found that there are 5 factors for what is the driver of engagement. The first one, giving your employees a purpose. So we buy into where the company's going, where our team's going, and are part of this purpose.
Okay.
Development. So, hey, I'm a part of this team. I'm going to be, my skills and my talents are going to be developed so I can grow as a person. Number 3, having a caring manager. So Susan cares about me, so therefore I feel good. And then this also, if we get underneath it all, care is a factor of trust, which is also part of psychological safety. So those things all mesh together quite well. The 4th factor is having ongoing conversations about feedback and development of the specific staff. And then the last one is focusing on their strengths. So putting them in a position to utilize their strengths to their fullest and develop capabilities in that way. And so all of those 5 things set the employee up to feel engaged in their work, which drives profitability, productivity, well-being, all the good things. And it doesn't really, where does it start? It starts with us caring about our folks.
Right. And part of that is training. And Susan, you pointed out in your great podcast with your former hockey teammates that the age 46 data, that the average age that a leader receives their very first training in managing people is a shocking 46 years old. So you don't have to be a math whiz to figure out that most leaders are out of their MBA programs out of college more than 20 years before they get their very first training. So how do you know about purpose development, caring manager, et cetera, unless you're taught or unless you're really lucky and you are being managed by someone who manages in that really positive way. So, we're highlighting the gaps. And, one piece of good news is that curriculum at business school is changing because of the pandemic. I mean, it was so radical a change in the workplace that, I've spoken to business school professors who validate that, yes, we're having to look at curriculum and changing it. But the reality is that it's not going to be in effect until 2024 or 2025.
Yeah.
So where does that leave us now? Which is why I'm so eager to jump on these podcasts with you. It's like, because I'm in rooms with people who say, what do I do now? What do I say right now?
So that's a great go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to say, and that's when you said lucky to be a manager, right? Or having luck to get the manager, the data backs that up too, right? So 34.9% of managers are considered non-destructive to their workforce. So on the converse, 65.1% of managers are destructive to their workforce, right? And so you totally also up top what you mentioned, it's not all me as a leader yelling at my people. There's also the passive behaviors like not being organized or being passive aggressive or being like non-confrontational, like all those behaviors as well contribute to destructive impacts on the workforce and therefore the goals. So it is this element of like, it's not just, hey, you looking at these people on TV or Elon Musk who yells at his people and saying like, hey, that's not me. there's still a whole
There's
other
a whole
bucket.
spectrum.
Go ahead, Susan.
I was just going to say, so where do we start? Because obviously we're doing these podcasts because we want to go on this mission. I know you have a book that's coming out in February called Staff Matters, and I'm sure there's some of this in there, but just so we can whet the appetite in terms of some of your favorite go-to strategies, where do we begin if we're looking to break this culture of silence? I mean, we've got this huge case going right now north of the border here with Hockey Canada. They've had their entire board step down, their president step down because of all these sexual harassment cases that they'd buried over the years.
Right.
And so that's the big question we see in our media every single day is like, what is Hockey Canada going to do, or what do they have to do to break this culture of silence, right? So where do we begin if we're leaders listening to this show right now?
Right. There's so many examples, not only in Canada, Harvey Weinstein from Hollywood is on trial this minute in Los Angeles for sexually assaulting over 100 women. We know that over 60 women have accused Bill Cosby. These are high profile cases, but we could go on and on and on naming them. So clearly accountability has begun. And to me, I know we agree that that's a good thing, that accountability needs to happen in order for targets, men and women, to come forward about these behaviors. But our leadership in companies need to be alert to the idea that they must address these issues in order to retain staff. One piece of data I wanted to call your attention to is that there's a recent poll which identified that it's women ages 18 through 29 who are the most stressed out in the workplace. 36% of that age group of women are reporting that they are highly stressed and, considering leaving their job. And I am very concerned about the long-term trauma of that. If that's the case when they're between ages 18 and 29, I mean, Susan, you remember 18 to 29? I do. And what happens to a woman when we're that age? Here's my point of view. And with the book Staff Matters, my mission was to bring together all what I refer to as the constituencies of the workplace. Because if we agree, the groups in the workplace include the leaders, they include support staff, i.e. assistants, administrators. It includes HR departments, and it includes recruiters, both internal and external, who are trying to populate the organization. And my point of view is that no one of those four groups will be able to fix what's broken alone. That what's needed is collaboration and cooperation at a new level. That this volatile new workplace we're in is crying for a new approach to collaborating with these groups of people. There are far too many leaders who tell me that they're not being talked to by their staffs. And I know from talking with staff that there's often fear in play, that there's a lot of fear to be the messenger. There's fear to deliver potentially negative news to leadership. And HR, many staff believe that HR is not for them, and therefore they will go around HR and avoid them at all costs. And then you have the recruiters who are trying to function without complete information because there's so little communication happening between the groups. So my book breaks that down. I've interviewed all four groups, and I literally asked them questions like, tell us what people don't know about your job. tell us what you need the other staff to know about what's in play for HR, for assistants, for leaders. We must do a much better job at bridging the gaps between these groups if we are going to move forward in a better way in this post-pandemic remote virtual world. This not being on webcam, this lack of connection, this fragmentation is only going to hurt us unless we can get a handle on it right now. I'm feeling an urgency about it. What do you all think?
Yeah, I think it has to start at the top, right? In reading your article, you agree, the one that you sent us on Friday there, right? Mm-hmm. Like it has to start with the very top, the CEO, the C-suite, like that's where the zero tolerance needs to begin, right?
Well, yeah, no real change is going to happen without the support of C-suite. But Susan, one thing that, and I've spoke in my conversations with leaders, what I've come to is that change can happen from the middle, meaning when staff are being interviewed for jobs, I'm a big advocate for them asking questions about sexual harassment policies and how is the culture of the company, and to ask some probing questions about culture, which will affect change from the middle. HR is certainly feeling the pain right now because they're having trouble populating organizations. So it's pretty messy right now. But I do, while I agree that no real change is going to happen without the support from the top, I think some of that change can be initiated by the middle. By people underneath.
The people taking a stand and rising up and demanding better, safer work conditions.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to shy away from the whole demanding piece because, like some people get frightened when they hear like, oh my gosh, Bonnie, are you talking about a union? Are you, talking about an uprising? And actually, no, I'm talking about intelligent cooperation. And leaders who I'm hoping my book can be part of cluing them in about the things that they frankly should be getting in business school, but have not. If we agree that the age 46, is valid, and I certainly see it playing out in the real world, then leaders need to be more proactive about getting their staff to speak honestly about what's really happening. Because I have to say that my concern is, if it's true that staff is fearful of speaking truth to power, as it were, then leaders are very busy making decisions right now, costly decisions that have long-range ramifications, and they're doing it with incomplete data, with incomplete information. And that worries the heck out of me.
That worries the heck out of us too, doesn't it, Rob? That's why we're on such a mission towards psych safety, right? Like we think that has to happen before any of this can occur, right? Is like really making sure that there is a foundation of like a space where people actually feel like they can come to you and talk to you about their issues and things that aren't working for them in terms of their work. And I think that's what I meant by taking a stand and demanding. It's like for those organizations that have not taken the time to create the foundations for psych safety, people are taking a stand. They're walking out the door. They are benching themselves.
That's a way of taking a stand for sure.
In sports, when you take yourself out of the lineup and there's nothing wrong with you, I think that's a statement in and of itself. So it's not an aggressive, we're going to fight, right? Type of stand that I'm talking about, but it's like things are moving in this direction. Clearly, that's what all these stats around the Great Resignation and quiet quitting, all of this are suggesting.
Yeah. And we're in the thick of it. Like there's so much volatility right now. We were talking before we went live about the idea that in the United States, only 6 out of 50 United States require sexual harassment training. Wow. And I have to admit, I was shocked by that statistic. And many staffers say that even when training exists, that it's just like ticking a box, that it's just obligatory. And, my point of view is that something is better than nothing. Now, the news is better in Canada, where as of January of 2021, your country required, across the board, mandated it. However, it's mandated once every 3 years, and supervisors are required to get 2 hours of training, and staff that are non-supervisors are required 1 hour of training once every 3 years. So I think, yes, on one hand, it's great that it's mandated. Absolutely. On the other hand, is it enough, or is it like ticking a box? And what are we going to do?
I'm interested to know, like, what does the training suggest that they have to lean into on the day-to-day, right? Like, not once every 3 years, but like, what are you learning about the patterns of behavior that a leader needs to exemplify to create those types of conditions for their people? Because we know that it's not possible to teach that in an hour or a 2-hour-long workshop.
Yes, I am thinking the very same thing. Like, what can you possibly communicate in an hour that would make a difference? And, company lawyers are all for this kind of training because they want to minimize lawsuits. Lawsuits have been, because of social media and how high profile these cases have been about both bullying and sexual harassment. They certainly want to avoid, high price litigation. And insurance companies are also in favor of doing this training in order to minimize risk, because that's their whole thing. So truly, the motivation for leaders to even do this training in the first place is coming from, in a large part, the lawyers and the insurance companies. But again, something is better than nothing. What do? We must raise awareness, and we must activate and engage the staff to speak to these issues. The silence, that we must break the silence around it. We cannot permit the silence to cover up these behaviors anymore.
And that's for us. I mean, we start everything with the foundation of self. And so it's like, even we were looking at the DEI trainings that are out there, and the vast majority of them are ineffective. And the same thing with leadership training, the 75% is ineffective. And with DEI, actually, you get the inverse. You get backlash because of the training, because folks are like, it's too complicated, or I'm going to get blamed for everything because I'm a white guy, or whatever it is, right?
Right.
And so we always start off with, what do we believe about ourselves and our mindset and how that presents itself in the world? And the data shows that around 99% of folks are not sociopaths. So that's a good thing. And really,
that is absolutely. I mean, Rob, as a man, do you think things are getting better, worse? Like, have you had, observations of your own about other men, about how they're behaving? What's your? I'd so be interested in
what are your observations, sir? What do you see over there, working in a locker room full of females, by the way?
To be honest, like, it's hard for me to say now, Bonnie, because the vast majority of what I do is with women. Both in our locker rooms, although with one of our companies, it's roughly 50-50. They try to split it. But even in the trainings that I'm in, the vast majority is women as well. So, like, literally, I was on a call for one of the trainings. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? And it was 3 men and like 45 women. And so one thing that I've been trying to bounce around my own mind is how do we get men to show up in these areas? Because even we had a podcast with Nick Johnson, which would have been out a few weeks ago, about vulnerability. And it's like loneliness has increased through the roof for the last 10 years. And men are actually massively impacted with this because for some reason we struggle more about making friends after college than women do. And so there needs to be some space where men can show up and be like, I'm not feeling good, or I struggle with depression, and have other men there that can bond. Where I find for me, I've done a lot of work, so it's not weird for me to talk to women about that. But some men, it's weird to show up in a group of women and being like, I'm not doing well.
That's a great question about how do we get men to show up in this situation. I think we really have to, in part, rely on empathy and bring men into the problem. If they don't know a problem exists, if they don't have any orientation for it, it's hard to relate, I'm sure. But all men have women in their life who they care about, whether it's a sister, a mother, a wife, a girlfriend, somebody. It's about imagining that it's them having these behaviors, being humiliated in a meeting, being called a moron, being called, names. We must do better in providing opportunities for conversation to share stories with each other about the real life events. And frankly, that's what I include in my book, Staff Matters. That, you can't make this stuff up. The assistant who was in a staff meeting and her executive came up to her from behind and, took her by the head on both sides of the head and shook her head from side to side and said, "So, did you leave your brain at home today?" And you got to know that she's not going to forget that anytime soon. And humiliating somebody is not the way to get great performance. So there it is.
That's incredibly horrific. And I have another quote here from Peter Levine that talks about literally this, right? And he says, the effects of unresolved trauma can be devastating. It can affect our habits and outlook on life, leading to addictions and poor decision making. It can take a toll on our family life and our interpersonal relationships. It can trigger real physical pain, symptoms, and disease. And it can lead to a range of self-destructive behaviors. And this we've talked about with Dr. Richard Schwartz. And another stat for folks that I want to just mention here is a study out of Stanford and Harvard Business School attributed 5 to 8% of all U.S. healthcare costs to the way we manage our people, and 120,000 deaths per year, which makes work the sixth leading cause of death in the United States. Now, I don't want to put this all on the leaders. I don't want to blame folks.
Right.
All of us can step up to the table and work together from a foundation of love to make a dent in this.
Yeah. I think it's legitimate to ask any group of people, have you ever been a bully? And certainly, Susan, I suspect women over the years who've behaved badly too. It's not only men targeting women, it's women targeting other women, right?
Because I think, especially in sports, I can say that because it was, locker rooms full of women who were very competitive, right? And vying for a spot or vying for a scholarship or vying for the playing time. And I think, that's typically the power dynamic that shows up in those types of environments. So no, this is not just limited to our gentlemen friends and cohorts and colleagues.
But what is similar is that awareness is needed. That in the book, I have a chapter that's literally called Sex, which is about gender issues in the workplace and the ways in which young girls are socialized versus how young boys are socialized. And, bullying behaviors in junior high and high school are well known, the mean girls. And we carry those behaviors straight up into the workplace unless we break the cycle. And how we break the cycle with both men and women is awareness about the pain and suffering that's being caused, and support to make the changes that need to happen. And they're not costly either. They don't have to be. It's as Rob, you were saying about genuinely caring for other people during the pandemic. The CEOs who chose to get lists of staffers and every single day pick up the phone to just call people and say, how are you doing? How's your family? Is everybody okay? Do you have everything you need? It just it went such a long way. The leaders who held weekly town halls to kind of diffuse the anxiety on staff, but leaders who just were vulnerable and said, I'm standing here and I don't have all the answers. I don't know how this is all going to play out, but I'm here to tell you we're working really hard and we want to hear from you. And you know where I'm going here. That vulnerability and just being visible, that doesn't cost anything to do, but it's so smart to do. I can't emphasize it enough.
And it's statistically what neuroscience now proves is the biggest driver of performance. Power within, not power over. That's the Leadership 2.0 mission that Rob and I here are on, right? And we've studied the heck out of this. And I think that's really where we want to land people today, is like this just makes human sense from a human dignity standpoint, treating humans in a way where we actually respect them, right? And show up to them in the way that we would want other people to show up to us. And then also in terms of what drives performance, all these things around trust and like safety and engagement, and right. So this is the thing, like, it doesn't matter if you're even looking at it like the lawyers and the insurance people are, just purely from what it's going to cost you if you do have to deal with these types of things. Hockey Canada paid out millions and millions and millions of dollars to try to deal with these sexual harassment cases. Money that was supposed to be used for the kids' registration fees. You know what I'm saying? So it doesn't matter how you slice the cake or what angle you look at this from. I feel like we've looked at it from every angle today. It just makes sense, people. This is where we're at here in 2022.
There's an arrogance in place by some leaders, and it remains to be seen what's going to happen with the Elon Musk case and Twitter, where he laid off a lot of staffers via an email. And then a few days later, tried to hire some back. And on social media is going crazy about, would you go back to work in that situation? And most people are saying, hell no. No, they're not. So what's going to win here? Leaders must lay people off at times. But my point on social media was it absolutely can happen without humiliating, demoralizing, and traumatizing people. Why was that necessary? And then someone said, well, Elon Musk has autism.
What, as if that's an excuse for treating people?
Yes, as his communication, his lack of sensitivity to the staff. I think it remains to be seen how this is all going to shake out. But autism or not, there there's a way to let people go, and a way that doesn't hurt them, destroy them for the remainder of their careers, or
and if
for the foreseeable future.
If he knows that about himself enough to use that as a reason, don't you think he could put the right person in place that does have the sensitivity and the empathy? Hello, clearly he has the resources.
That would seem logical. And, I think we need to think, well, maybe there's circumstances that we don't understand about this, perhaps, but on the surface, it seems like this was poor management. That this is that, if we're concerned about public relations and the way, is this really going to be an environment that people are going to want to work at this company?
Not an environment where they will thrive at the very least, right? From a performance perspective. We saw what happened with that Better.com CEO. Remember back, I think it was at the start of January or February 2022. He did it the same way and he got all kinds of backlash, right?
He did it on Zoom.
And he mocked them as he did it. It was just the most salacious thing you've ever seen.
You're slacking off and you're fired.
They're lazy.
Right now.
He called them lazy.
Yeah.
Bonnie, what do you want all of this fabulous work that you're doing, writing books and stepping on TED stages to spread this ripple effect? What do you want the legacy of all of this to be?
I want to build a better workplace. I call it an ultimate workplace, or as close as we can get to it. And I see that there's much that's broken in our workplace, and it is urgently time to address those issues. So I see as my legacy as a truth teller, from what I see in the 1,500 interviews I've done. The staff has talked to me, and they have shared honestly stories that will inform leaders about how they can do better tomorrow. Let us just do better tomorrow. And part of that, Susan and Rob, is about improving the communication so leaders have the full information in order to make the decisions they're making. That's what I'm very concerned about, and what I'm hoping will occur. Because of that age 46 issue, I also have a dream and hope that my book, Staff Matters, can end up on the recommended reading list at business schools, that to fill a gap. Like this could be, a real resource guide to help fill in the blanks. Like essentially, here, MBA graduate, this is what will benefit you when you walk into a company and within weeks or months they say, and here are your 3 direct reports. What do you do with them? And it shouldn't be between ages 22 and 46 that they're winging it. I think we can be doing it so much better.
Amen.
I love it. And actually, we're just wrapping up our Aspiring Leaders program that fills a similar gap for folks that are young and in their workplace careers. So
you're doing amazing work.
Yeah.
Obviously, for folks out there, you can follow Bonnie on LinkedIn. We dropped it in the podcast notes, and pick up her book, Staff Matters. Well, actually, we can wait on that one till February, but Bonnie will let us know when it's out, and we'll definitely have her back on.
It's going to be in pre-order like really soon, next week or the week after.
Oh, great. Just on Amazon. Christmas. Yay.
Indeed. It'll be available on pre-order. I'm really excited about it. I believe it will contribute to the conversation that needs to be had right now in 2022. And I'm just so grateful for this conversation that I've had with you.
We're so grateful for you.
And we'll drop that in the podcast notes as well, because I believe this one will be live in a few weeks. So it may coincide. So check that one out. For us, obviously, please hit subscribe to Leadership Launchpad Project on your favorite podcast platform. We're available Apple, Amazon Music, Stitcher, Spotify, the whole bit. And share this one with any leaders in your life. And then obviously for any leadership programs, development, trust, like safety, conflict management, and more, head on over to elitehighperformance.com for all of that. Susan, where do you want to land folks today?
Real simple. You heard it right from Bonnie herself. It all starts with awareness. That is why we take time to do interviews with fabulous experts like Bonnie. So please spread this ripple effect. Share this with all your friends, your peers, your leaders, etc.
I love that. And for me, I just want to leave folks with this is what we described in today's podcast is a set of behaviors. It's not a person.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you noticed, or if you create a space or have someone create a space, which we do as well, if you have someone create a space and you learn that you take part in some of these behaviors, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
I know I've had some asshole behaviors, and we can always become self-aware and change.
Yep.
And that's the message, is it's not all your fault, and it's not a part of you. It's a behavior that you can become aware of, and that you can change your mindset and develop who you are to show up as the person and the leader you want to be. Bonnie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Rob and Susan. Thank you for the great work you're doing.
Everyone, we thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.